with the smallest spade.
Good Horizon Nation, right by your zip offs there.
I better right by my zip offs. Should I get out of the way? There's some Horizon today. Horizon today. Oh! Got it. Someone had to get it. All right.
All right. So we've been throwing around this term horizon. What defines a horizon?
All the way in.
Color variation in the soil.
A change in something, right?
Yeah.
It can be color, it can be structure, it can be texture. The ones that usually define it are changes in color. And then as you get deeper, sometimes the color doesn't change that much, but you'll see a change in the structure of the soil. Like you might go from, blocky to prismatic, or subangular blocky to blocky, or you might pick up, some rock fragments. There's a bunch of different things that, we could look at to determine where we have a change in horizon. Presence of roots, absence of roots, things like that can also be good indicators. Like, okay, there's something inhibiting roots right here at this spot. They're above here, they're not. So there must be a restrictive layer or something like that. So that's sort of the first thing we do when we get into a pit like this. You want to come down, or?
Yeah, I'll come down.
Let's go see if you were scared or not.
No, I'm not scared. I was wanting to make sure they could.
We got watch out for over there, because you'll sink over there.
So we've already talked about sort of a potential changes in horizon due to this sort of darker color. We identified that from way up there, right? And then we noticed the darker color down here. So what we want to look at is where those splits really are, and is this all one horizon, or is it two horizons, and is this even one horizon or two horizon? So let's start there. From the top here, just visually to here, do you think that's one horizon or two?
One.
So definitively, we're all saying one, right?
Absolutely.
I say it's two.
What's this O and A?
And I'll tell you the reason why. And somebody give me one of their little trowels and we'll pass this around.
Don't be scared. Your roots were not going to come off. I promise. That's what they're for. Oh, but they're brand new. Oh, this is awesome.
You christened them.
They're not that brand new, but
Start passing this around. Everybody get a little bit dirty. Soil, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
Some creatures in there. Who wants a worm?
I want a worm. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Don't be shy, man.
Oh no.
Pass some more.
This is top couple inches.
This is the top. We should probably have some dirt.
Do you have flags?
No.
Do you have a tape measure?
There's one in my box, but it's on it.
You want a worm? There's a worm in this one.
A little bit of dirt. No, I don't want the worm.
You don't want the worm.
Pay attention, Rose.
Should be
Put the worm back in the dirt. Oh, well, now we're probably stuck on it.
Hey, Carmen.
Fly right there.
Yeah, you can make it work.
Oh, yeah,
Nice.
Has everybody got a little bit of this?
We passed it yet.
Oh boy.
Put a little piece together.
Why? I'm holding the line. It's like my life vessel, so thank you.
There's a ribbon.
All right. So look at what we got here. What do you think the structure on that is? Granular, right. And I always say granular looks like granola.
Looks like grape nuts.
It kind of looks like grape
nuts.
nuts.
Just like grape nuts.
Yeah. So it's definitely fallen into little, sort of
Dippin' Dots.
Yeah.
There you go.
We'll talk about color here in a minute.
Dark chocolate.
Chocolate.
Okay, and so this is just below that. Pass it around.
This
Here, this is just below the surface.
Right there.
Just below the surface. So don't necessarily get rid of your granular. Hold on. Just somebody else.
There's more clay in this one, so.
Someone else wants some more? Here, you want to pass some of this back? This is the new one? Number 2? This is number 2.
You gotta keep some of it.
Y'all get some?
Yes, we are grape nuts and
Who wants number 2
chocolate
dirt?
chunks.
Need some number 2 dirt, baby. Who needs number 2
Not have
dirt?
breakfast
Rose, take some number 2 dirt.
Okay,
offer her
so pretty close to the same color, right?
Yeah.
Structure the same?
No.
No. So we still have a little bit of granular in there, but we also have these bigger chunks that are kind of sticking together. And take one and just take it in between your fingers and do like that and see what happens.
Whoa.
So you end up with these little subangular blocky things, right?
I did too. Mine exploded.
So clearly those are a little bit different, right? Okay, so here's what we have. We have a situation where our color is probably the same. We'll get some color books out. But we definitely have a change in structure from 4 inches to about 10 inches. That's different from 0 to 4 inches, right?
So that's because of the root depth penetration?
It could be from a bunch of different things. It could be from mowing, animals, roots.
Because I noticed a lot of roots in the one I had, but not much in the ones that we had.
Yeah, I think the abundance of roots really kind of stop around 5 to 6 inches. I mean, there's roots that go, so somebody said something about rooting depth and grasses having shallow roots, and kind of in general, when you mow a lot, that can happen, but this isn't mowed a lot, and look how deep some of these roots are. I mean, they go way down.
You have grass roots all the way down here.
Oh, wow.
So that's over 3 feet we have grass roots. So yeah, the majority of them are up here.
So is it an organic matter thing then too?
Probably. So what we call this, we would call this 0 to 4 inches. What our horizon. And sometimes we call it an AP because it's basically, I've got some spoons here.
The breakfast theme continues.
We didn't talk much about the sub-horizons, but the A, remember we saw that O horizon on that diagram, and again the O tends to happen when we have really undisturbed soils for a long period of time to get that organic matter to start there and be really well developed.
And usually you only see those in forested environments. So those of you who were out with me looking at that pit at Robinson Forest, we had an O horizon because we had a lot of organic matter that's been accumulating there for a long time, and it's semi broken down. It's starting to be soil, but it's still more organic than actual mineral.
Right.
So,
and even though it's not been, this area hasn't been plowed in I don't know how many years. This has been like as a kind of a grassland kind of thing, but it's still, that little P is just a designation that we give it that means it's really been disturbed, but we call it a plow.
But there's also a type of vegetation, right? Because your tree litter is going to have a lot more carbon than your grass. Is that true? Or is that?
No, I mean, you can, in a prairie, you can get an O horizon where it's been that way forever. But this has been mowed and it's been plowed in the recent past. So, but really for the intents of this discussion, it's an A horizon. And then this has lots of similarities to this, and its structure is more similar to below it. So sometimes we would refer to this as a transitional horizon. It has a little bit of what's above and maybe a little bit, at least structurally, from what's going down below. But from a color perspective, it's much more like the thing above it. So we refer to this, as soil scientists,
the royal we,
as probably an AB horizon. So it's got a little bit of both. And if it was more like this than it was this, then it might be, well, it would still be an AB horizon, or could it be a B? Yeah. So, and there's some people that like to split them, and then there's other soil scientists that think that they all need to be separate. So you have your lumpers and your splitters. And,
in life, you will find that to be true also.
Yeah.
There are lumpers and splitters.
And one of the more enjoyable things I do is every now and then I go out with a whole bunch of soil scientists and we have a pit, and then you start describing it, and they get into like the craziest arguments about what we're talking about right now. I'm just like, really? Does it matter that much that this is an AB or a B? But
in the grand scheme of life.
yeah.
But that may really turn your crank. So if you're really interested in arguing about soil color, then this is a potential for you.
So where does this AB horizon end and the next horizon start, do you think?
Okay, so here's 14. 13. Down. Up. Right out in like the middle. Here?
Yeah.
At 12.
There you go. Good thing I brought that spoon.
I know. Thanks for the spoon. So if you have your soil, if you haven't dropped your soil or made a mud ball out of it, does anybody still have theirs? It's just loose. That's just undisturbed. So there's the next one, and you might compare the color just in the palm of your hand from the one that was above it.
Carmen, take note of this. We still have it loose.
Here, I'll give you a little more of the darker. And you can just bring that back. Bring that back.
Mine's not
So
a ball.
hold your hands out side by side.
He's practicing soul origami.
So you can see, like, it's really hard to see it on the profile sometimes, and your eyes start wobbling. But if you put a little in your hand and in two different hands, it's much easier to see how different the color is. So when you're in doubt, take a little sample, look at it in your hand, and then you can also see a little bit different in the texture a little bit.
So when you do the soil color, the moisture that you put into it matters, right?
Yeah.
It needs to be moist. Those samples we had last night, they were really dry, the bagged ones. You just want to make sure it's wetted, but you don't want it necessarily saturated.
Just like a moist cake, like consistency is that?
Yeah, I
So
usually
usually we have to bring a water bottle out with us. So right now we don't have to do
We don't
anything.
need that.
It's perfect.
Yeah, but that's why I brought the water bottles too, for texture as well, to make ribbons. What I was holding is still the second.
So do you want to?
Oh wait,
Or should we go ahead and just delineate it?
I just don't want that.
That's more beefy.
Okay, so what do you see?
Which is the next one?
Where's the obvious big break between here and the bottom?
I can't, 30 or 40. Yeah.
There?
Yeah.
40, yeah. I can't see from here. I see a form, but 40, yeah.
Can you all hear can you hear the difference when he's digging?
Hear the rock?
I don't like that.
So
So from here,
What do you think I do at work?
Rose almost went down. Oh no.
There you go.
Should I push you into the motherfucker's face?
I don't like compacting soil.
Victor, get out of the pit.
all right. So we definitely have something going on right here, don't we?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will agree with you that that's a different horizon.
Yeah.
So the question is all of this one big horizon, or are there more?
I'm gonna say there's more.
So we can start to investigate that a little bit. One of the things I talked about up above, remember I said that there's manganese?
Yes.
Take that and rub your fingers on it. see if you can't break it up, and you'll see that it's sort of purple inside, all of these little concretions. And when they are reduced, they are wet, they can cause streaking. And you can see where I cut through here, some of that stuff streaks down.
Oh, there's a big one.
Oh yeah.
Did you make it?
Thank you.
Heroes.
It's like the chocolate granola. Rosy wings.
Okay, and then we have this white stuff. What do you think that is?
Limestone.
Right,
That's what I meant.
it's probably
That's what I said.
Little reindeer ring.
bits of your limestone.
There's some little black.
That's what you're talking about. Is that your ring?
If we dig down a little bit farther, this whole thing down here is just a bed of shells, fossilized seashells. And, so we're sitting right on top of this. So here, you can pass this around.
Panda.
Yep.
This is really cool.
I know, isn't that awesome? That big
Y'all take a look at this one. It looks like you can actually see the soil forming inside of it.
Yes.
Look at that.
The limestone that contains of like fossilized
Looks like the soil's
seashells
actually
and
forming
the
inside of
trilobites,
it.
I believe. Is that oolitic limestone?
Not oolitic. It's this is not dolomitic. This is
Calcium.
You
no.
mean in general or
The
here?
limestone here?
Yeah, I mean in general or here?
It's phosphatic limestone.
No, I mean like, talking about like the soil here or like just.
But yeah, this is not dolomite. So yeah,
It
this
does
is
look like an
The
Oreo.
dolomite doesn't show up until I think around Louisville. I said the dolomite doesn't show up until around Louisville area, if I remember right. That was where they were seeing
Well,
the outer bluegrass. They saw a lot of it out there.
And if you go to the Eden Shales area right before there, you change into that.
Yeah.
So this is like calcite, calcium carbonate, but it has phosphorus in it too.
If I remember, Steve said when we were out in the field in Louisville, he said a trained geologist could tell the difference, but like we would probably have a really hard time. But he said the dolomite was a little bit grittier, like when they fill it.
Yeah.
He could hold two samples to me, and I couldn't tell the difference. But
Well, and it's also closer associated to the shale formations, which is transitional between bluegrass
And the knobs.
So, so what's the structure here?
Hey, Chris, we don't have, Monty had a good question, and I didn't know it. How small can you get and still be blocky? Because like the picture Amanda showed was like a really big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, well,
Subangular blocky.
it's
It's not
small.
as rounded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this has
It's
really
really-
actually no structure. It's just what we would call a hodgepodge of crud.
I will quote you on that one.
Hodgepodge crud.
I don't think that's an option on the real data sheet.
So when I go down through here, and I'll tell you what we really call it, it doesn't break it. I mean, of course it'll break into whatever I want it to, but it's like layered and it's like granular and it has every structure known to man in
It's
it.
got platy, a bit of platy.
A bit of platy, it's got a bit of granular, it's got
That's the
subangular
sheets,
blocky.
yeah.
But we call it massive because it's so hard, it's really stuck together. And so this is actually our sea horizon. This is the parent material that's breaking down. It's not bedrock, but so it's starting to become soil, but it's just so deep and the weathering processes are so slow down there compared to up here that we don't have a lot of soil formation yet.
And what's absent down there that we would have a lot of up here?
Like the slate test she did.
Well, yeah, of the soil forming factors. Yeah, the organisms. Like the organisms, like somebody got a worm in the first handful, and you could see all kinds of little microscopic and even critters you can see that are all focused here because they're eating on this root material, right? That carbon source. And down low, there's not that much. So the soil forming factors, when Chris is saying that it's slow forming factors, that there's not the same influence as up here that the organisms, because that's kind of missing down low. The cork.
The cork.
Yep.
So yeah, so even your roots pretty much stop right at that zone. So this is just not weathered enough yet to be actual, I mean, it's still considered soil. It's a sea horizon. If we went down a little bit farther, we would hit bedrock. But so this is material that is, what do you call it? It's still weathering, and it's got a tiny bit of structure, but I would still call it sort of massive. It's just a hodgepodge of crud.
The technical term.
All right, so that was easy. Now the hard part. All right, pass that around.
Whether soil thing.
It's the offering.
Anybody want some soil? Use it wisely.
I got my word.
Dave, what is it? Pass it back.
Give me all of it. Yeah, give me all that.
Who wants some dirt? It's soil.
Have some dirt, sir. I got so much.
You want some more?
Here you go, everybody.
You want some more soil?
Thank you, Quinn. Thank you for using the correct terminology.
More?
No, I think we're good. Want some more?
Okay, so how does it break apart into the aggregates? Are they larger or smaller than what you've seen before?
Larger.
And they're not like rounded like the top.
They're not rounded. They're kind of blocky, but do they have really sharp angles on the blocks?
It looks like they. Well, some
Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Some? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. Makes a year.
Some of my big ones do.
So maybe okay. That one has a more a stronger angle. I would probably still call it subangular, but we're getting closer. So see how hers if you keep crumbling it, it will be granite.
Yeah.
I know. But you just want to like tap it with your pick or with your trowel, and how it naturally breaks apart. That's what you're trying to figure out, is how it naturally breaks apart. So I mean it's a stronger subangular, but I would still call it subangular. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Okay, some other things we want to look at. Do you see, did you talk about models?
A little bit, but not a whole lot.
So does this soil have like one matrix color and then you see like little inclusions of another color in it, or is it pretty uniform?
Yeah.
Little bits of black.
Black bits.
Okay, so the black things, are those hard?
Hard.
Right. So those are what we call concretions, and it's probably that manganese again. So we have, I would call that a few to a little more than a few of these concretions. And I really don't see any modeling. Like usually with modeling it would be gray against a red color, or vice versa, red and a gray matrix. Sometimes you might get black dots that aren't hard. And those would be models and not concretions. So we have some concretions, we have a fairly uniform color, and we have subangular blocking. All right, let's go down a little bit farther.
And so the reason we don't have the modeling is because this gets drained fairly well.
Because it's draining.
Yeah, the
right
water
onto it.
table is not fluctuating a lot here yet.
We'll top it.
All right. Pass them on around.
So Ashley, this is stuff here that we use a lot with engineering.
Get a 0. I'm proud.
How was that on me?
Everything is your fault. Owen. You should know.
Oh, and you were saying we use this a lot. Like when you were a child, when we
No one gets
model the hydrology, one of the things we always look at with the soil is we will classify by what we call hydrologic soil group, so how well it may or may not drain. And that's where we get a lot of.
Me too, Owen.
Right. We use a lot of this to kind of figure out that storms, how much we're design structure to handle.
So that's for Owen.
Maybe need some.
Why is this heading
Stuck.
Okay.
I was just explaining my. No,
Your exit.
Anybody need some more?
Just don't
His
push
name is
your knee.
Victor.
Yeah, sure.
So look at this one.
Good job.
Okay, so what about structure on this one? Okay, so somebody said more angular on the blocks, right? So can you kind of see that difference? It's subtle, but it's there. And so especially if we have two samples side by side in our hands, if anybody has the previous one, you can kind of tell that these are starting to get a little more angular as they break apart. Any idea why they might be getting a little more angular? Any guess? We haven't talked as much about this, but I think we talked about the clay particles maybe concentrating in those lower horizons, so we would have more, potentially, we don't know yet because we haven't done our texture, but might have more clay pickup as we move down that soil profile.
So what else do we see?